Hi everyone. So after Nahamadina has done her demonstration and I've seen some of your strainings, I'm going to show you how I do mine, which is pretty much the same. A few little maybe added or different, but all the same variations. Generally I use cheesecloth. I double or triple it. And then with this particular formula, that is using dried herbs and especially herbs like chamomile. I would use the cheesecloth and then use the coffee filter because the marc, which is the leftover herb that we strain, we can sometimes get a little bit of residue of that, tiny, like almost powdered residue. And sometimes if you use a herbal tincture, you might find it at the bottom of the bottle. Or sometimes, after only a few uses, it might even be in the droppers. Sometimes, I make and sell Bidens. I use Bidens. Sometimes I find a little bit of green residue. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not as aesthetic. And also, we try to get all the marc. I like to use, that's one of the reasons I like to use cheesecloth, is to actually squeeze as much marc in as possible, and then I'll use the coffee filter to make sure that we get as least as possible of that residue. When I use fresh herbs, I don't always, but definitely when you're using flowers, blossoms, some of the dried herbs that are going to actually powder, then they may get through the cheesecloth. So without further ado, let me show you how I do it. Okay, so first of all, this is one that I already, where's the light? This is one that I already did. This is, I made two. So this one is the Bitters Herbal Formula in a base of vodka. And as you can see, it's been straining for a while. I'm going to show you the top. There's just a tiny little bit left. And I want to show you the jar that I had strained into. If you can see, I don't know how well you can see that, but if I turn it, maybe you can see there was a little residue in there. You can see it's a little thicker, it's a little powdery. So that's why I did this double straining. Now I'm going to use the same kind of jar. They're not going to be full. It's just very convenient because they have a nice wide mouth and it's easier for me to put my strainer on that. And I can always transfer to a smaller jar afterwards or straight into bottles. Usually I leave them in my jar with a label and then put into bottles as needed. So here is my cheesecloth. So I already cut it and I'm just showing you, this is double and then this is single. So I have it it's actually three layers. And yeah, I cut relatively big pieces. The one inside is not as big, and that's okay. And I'll explain to you the reason why in a minute. So there I am holding it in, and I will hold it as I pour, as much as I can in the beginning. And we're going to try and get most of the marc in, and then I'm going to pull the sides up and I'm going to squeeze. It gets messy some of the time, and so you can either do it on a counter that you don't mind getting wet or use a dishcloth under. Okay, so this is the one. Here, I'm going to show you. See what I got? Even here, there's always a little bit of residue on the bottom. So I'm just going to shake it because I want to get everything. We don't want to let any little bit go to waste. So I'm going to start pouring, and hopefully I don't make too much mess. Usually I'm quite messy. There we go. Yep, I spilled quite a bit. Sometimes I use bigger strainers, and you can also use a funnel, a strainer, or cheesecloth in a funnel. And I sometimes use a French press. I actually like to use a French press when I have a lot of herb, and typically I'll use that and then pour that into cheesecloth. So I still like to pour it in. Now, as you can see, this is going over, it's going over the rim. So I have a hand here and I'm lifting up the sides. Hopefully you can see with the camera. It seems like, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to try and get everything out. There we go. And I lift up the sides. Okay, there we go. See? Now I have more control over it, and I just gently squeeze, and as you can see, it is going in, right? So I'm gently squeezing as it goes in, and not much spilt out at all, and continue squeezing, and towards the end, I'm going to squeeze as much as possible to get it out. And just in case pieces fall out, I usually leave the strainer. But at this point, since we're going to do the coffee filter afterwards, I am going to take the strainer out, and I am just going to twist it around and squeeze as you would wring out a dishcloth or a towel or anything you want to see how much you get. And that is the good stuff. All the good stuff is right there, because we want full strength and we don't want to waste anything. Right, and next, change to get good exercise in both arms. There we go. Okay, so I think that I squeezed pretty much everything out. If you compost, you can put this in your compost, and if not, you can just toss it. And I try and reuse as much as I can the cheesecloth, which doesn't always happen. But if you can wash the cheesecloth. So now I'm going to reuse this, and I'm going to put in a new unfiltered coffee filter. You could use whatever you have, but that's just what I like to use. Now, before I put it in here, I want to show you the color. You can see that it's a very, it almost looks like coffee, right? It has like a caramelly coffee. It's not clear. And this one was done in a base of Scotch whiskey. So it has a little bit of a different, this is the one in vodka, and this one was in the Scotch whiskey. So just the difference in these two mediums, these two different alcohols, shows you how different they look. So I'm going to pour this in, and this is going to take quite a while to slowly filter through. So in the meantime, I'm going to put a sticker, a label. Is it this one? Nope. I wrote them out beforehand, and you want to write what it is. You want to write what is inside, the ingredients, and very important, the date. So you stick that on wherever you have room on your jar, and put your cover on.